when Alexander the Great died in 323 BC at the age of 32. His body reportedly showed no signs of decomposition for 6 days, astonishing the ancient Greeks and fueling the belief that he was a god. But modern medical experts have proposed a much darker explanation. Alexander may have suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that causes full body paralysis while leaving the person mentally aware. If true, it means he may have been mistakenly declared dead while still conscious, and was ultimately buried alive, fully aware of what was happening but unable to move or speak. In 1969, the Black Panthers launched a free breakfast program that fed thousands of hungry kids before school in the poorest black communities. But J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI saw it as a threat to national security, apparently fearing that it would make the Black Panthers look too humane. So in response, in multiple cities, police raided kitchens at dawn, tearing apart food supplies, and in some cases even urinating on the groceries, making it clear that feeding black children was more threatening than letting them starve. On July 14, 2017, Chester Bennington appeared in a carpool karaoke episode with comedian Ken Jeong. In the video, Chester looks joyful and full of life, laughing, cracking jokes, and singing along to Linkin Park hits as well as popular songs like Hey Ya. The footage offers a bittersweet glimpse of a man who appeared to be genuinely happy just 6 days before he tragically took his own life. In 1993, a Mexican zoo official was arrested in Miami after trying to illegally purchase a live gorilla, only to discover the animal was actually an undercover agent in a gorilla suit. The operation was part of a federal wildlife trafficking bust and led to one of the most ridiculous arrests in American history. As a child in the Philippines, boxing legend Manny Pacquiao ran away from home after witnessing a horrifying act. His father, drunk and enraged, killed and ate the family's pet dog. Devastated, Pacquiao fled and began living on the streets, sleeping in a cardboard box and surviving by selling donuts and scraps. The trauma of watching that happen to his beloved pet pushed him into a life of brutal survival at just 12 years old, an early glimpse of the hardship and violence that would define his relentless drive in the ring. In 2020, Tim Bleefnick appeared on Family Feud and joked that the biggest mistake he made at his wedding was saying "I do."
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
But 3 years later, in February of 2023, his estranged wife Rebecca Bleefnick was found shot 14 times in their home while their 3 young boys were upstairs. The couple had apparently been going through a bitter divorce, and Tim went to the extreme to deal with it. He was arrested, convicted of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When 36-year-old Heather McManamy was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she began writing dozens of greeting cards for her young daughter to open in the years after she was gone, covering birthdays, graduations, heartbreaks, and even her wedding day. Each card was filled with love, jokes, and advice, allowing her daughter to still receive words of comfort and celebration long after Heather's death in 2015. It was her way of staying present for every milestone she knew she wouldn't live to see. In the months leading up to his death, actor and comedian Chris Farley was visibly deteriorating, sweating profusely, coughing up blood, and often unable to walk without assistance. His appearances on SNL and late-night shows became increasingly erratic as producers began to fear he might die right on set. On December 18, 1997, he was found face down in his Chicago apartment wearing only a shirt after several days of binging on alcohol and hard drugs. The last person to see him alive was a sex worker he had hired named Heidi Hauser. As she was leaving, Farley reportedly followed her down the hall while begging her, "Don't leave me, please don't leave me," which were likely his final words. The cause of death was a speedball overdose, a lethal mix of cocaine and morphine. Eerily, Farley idolized John Belushi and always said he wanted to be just like him, even saying in sketches, "I'll probably go out like Belushi." Both comedians died of speedball overdoses at the young age of 33. Christina Formella, a 30-year-old special ed teacher and soccer coach at a high school in Illinois, is facing 55 felony charges tied to alleged misconduct with a student that reportedly began when he was just 14 years old. Authorities claim the inappropriate relationship lasted nearly 2 years and involved over 50 encounters, many occurring on school grounds during class hours and some at the teacher's own home while her husband was away. The case began after the student's mother found concerning messages on the boy's phone, prompting Formella's arrest in March March of 2025. Investigators later uncovered writings where Formella accused the student of cheating on her and even mentioned plans to take her husband's money and disappear. But despite these allegations, her husband has continued to stand by her, even accompanying her to court appearances while holding her hand. Formella has pleaded not guilty to her charges and is out on bond under strict conditions. If convicted, she faces up to 60 years in prison. Known online as Pioneers Productions, Randy Stair became obsessed with the cartoon Danny Phantom and was convinced that he'd be reincarnated as a character on the show named Ember. While working a night shift at a grocery store in Pennsylvania, he blocked all the exits, pulled out 2 shotguns, and murdered 3 coworkers before turning the gun on himself in the frozen foods aisle. Police later uncovered a trove of videos and writings outlining his delusions and plans, in which he explained his belief that these murders would allow him to cross over into the animated world of Danny Phantom. During a morning broadcast in 1974, Florida news reporter Christine Chubbuck calmly announced, "In keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts, you're going to see another first, attempted suicide." She then proceeded to take her own life on live TV. Many viewers and even people in the control room assumed it was a scripted segment or a special effects stunt. Christine had reportedly long struggled with depression, loneliness, and frustration over the channel's focus on violent topics and sensationalism. Her death completely shocked the nation and remains one of the most disturbing moments in broadcast history. Dr. Fauci's NIH division, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, funded a series of horrific experiments on beagle puppies between 2016 and 2020. One of the most graphic studies involved dogs placed in mesh cages while sandflies were allowed to bite and feed on their heads, allegedly to study how certain parasites are transmitted in hopes of improving treatments for parasitic infections affecting humans. Some dogs were reportedly devocalized to prevent barking and were euthanized at the end of the studies. While Fauci wasn't personally conducting the tests, his agency approved the funding of about $375,000 for the research. Critics, including lawmakers and animal rights groups, condemned the studies as unnecessarily cruel and accused the NIH of lacking transparency and ethical oversight in approving such horrific procedures. The incident sparked widespread outrage online, with many calling for Dr. Fauci to be held responsible for the funding decisions made under his leadership. There were countless serious warning signs leading up to the implosion of the OceanGate Titan submersible. Experts repeatedly flagged the vessel's experimental design, particularly its carbon fiber hull, which is prone to microscopic weaknesses under deep-sea pressure. Former OceanGate employees raised alarms about structural integrity, previous dive malfunctions, the fact that the sub's navigation system relied on a modded Xbox controller, and over 100 documented equipment issues, including a 2022 incident where passengers heard alarming cracking sounds as the pressure increased. But despite this, OceanGate's CEO Stockton Rush pushed forward, publicly dismissing regulation as a barrier to innovation. In fact, the warning signs were so clearly numerous that after the implosion, many have speculated that Rush may have even had suicidal intentions, citing his repeated disregard for safety warnings and his presence on board during the fatal dive, though no evidence has officially confirmed this theory. Coach Tyler Wall was a 38-year-old fitness mentor who played a central role in MrBeast's recent video, Lose 100 Pounds, Win $250,000, where he trained contestant Maj in a grueling months-long weight loss journey. Tyler provided constant support physically and emotionally as Maj fought to shed over 100 pounds. But tragically, midway through filming, Coach Wall was found dead in his Greenville, North Carolina apartment on February 18, 2025. His death was described as sudden and unexpected, with no official cause publicly disclosed. Completely devastated, the MrBeast team gave Maj the choice to stop the challenge, but he chose to continue in honor of his late coach. Maj ultimately completed the drastic transformation, dropping from 324 pounds to 222, achieving the goal he and his coach set out to reach together. Despite initial hesitation, the MrBeast team chose to release the video with a tribute honoring Tyler's impact, ending with the words, "In loving memory of Coach Tyler Wall." Decades of intense drumming took a brutal toll on Phil Collins' body, causing such severe nerve damage that he could no longer hold onto drumsticks. After spinal surgery in 2009, Collins lost much of the feeling in his hands and was forced to give up drumming entirely. The loss devastated him to the point where he contemplated taking his own life. In 1974, Stanford student Arliss Perry was found murdered in a campus chapel, posed kneeling at the altar with a candle stuck inside her body in what appeared to be a ritualistic killing. The case went cold for decades until in 2018, DNA linked it to a campus security guard who took his own life as police attempted to arrest him. In 2021, during a wedding ceremony in Uttar Pradesh, India, a bride named Sarabi collapsed from a heart attack and was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. But instead of canceling the expensive event, both families agreed to continue the wedding by marrying the groom to Sarabi's younger sister, Nisha. The ceremony went on while Sarabi's body was placed in another room in the house. The incident shocked many and was confirmed by local news and relatives, who watched in total disbelief as a wedding and funeral unfolded under the same roof. Mark Hoffman was a skilled forger who gained notoriety in 1980s Utah by selling fake historical documents, many of which targeted early Mormon history. His most infamous creation, the Salamander Letter, falsely claimed that Joseph Smith's divine revelations involved a magical salamander, casting the origins of the Latter-day Saints Church in a bizarre and controversial light. Hoffman sold these forgeries for tens of thousands of dollars, duping collectors, historians, and even high-ranking church officials. But as demand grew, he began accepting payments for documents he hadn't yet forged, falling deep into debt. When clients started questioning delays in authenticity, Hoffman resorted to violence, killing 2 people with homemade bombs before accidentally injuring himself while attempting to plant a third. Although mangled, he survived and later pled guilty to murder and fraud. Now 70 years old, he's been in prison since 1987 and will likely remain there for the rest of his life. Before launching Punk'd, Ashton Kutcher was developing a much darker hidden camera show called Harassment. In 2002, one of its earliest pranks involved staging a gruesome fake murder scene inside a Las Vegas hotel room, complete with a very realistic, bloody, lifeless corpse. 2 unsuspecting guests walked in, believed they had discovered a real dead body, and were left completely traumatized. The stunt triggered a $10 million lawsuit against Kutcher, MTV, and the hotel, forcing the network to shut down the show before even airing a single episode. The backlash was so severe that Harassment was scrapped entirely, leading to the creation of the far tamer celebrity prank show Punk'd. In 2007, a Massachusetts state employee named Michael Fiola was nearly sent to prison after countless files of child porn were discovered on his work-issued laptop. He was immediately fired and charged, facing years behind bars, until forensic experts discovered that the device had actually been infected with a virus that automatically visited up to 40 CP sites per minute, even when he was nowhere near it. The activity was so extreme and constant that it proved impossible for a human to replicate, ultimately clearing Fiola's name. Though the charges were dropped, Michael and his wife spent nearly $250,000 defending him from an awful crime he never committed. Before becoming one of boxing's most infamous promoters, Don King was no stranger to violence. In 1954, he shot and killed a man who was allegedly trying to rob one of King's gambling operations. The killing was ruled self-defense, and King walked free. But in 1966, he was involved in a far more brutal incident, stomping a man to death over a $600 gambling debt. He was convicted of manslaughter and served only 4 years in prison. After his release, King quickly climbed the ranks of the pro boxing world, building a multi-million-dollar empire despite the bodies he left behind. In 2001, an elderly Japanese man named Tatsuo Osako passed away quietly at the age of 88. It wasn't until after his death that people discovered he had helped over 2,000 Jewish refugees escape Nazi persecution during World War II by quietly stamping their travel documents and sheep-herding them onto ships bound for safety. He never spoke of his actions, kept no accolades, and lived a modest life as a travel agent. His family only found out that he'd secretly saved thousands of lives after discovering old photos and records that were tucked away in his home. Tara Correa McMullen was a rising young actress best known for playing a gang-affiliated teen on Judging Amy. But in a cruel twist of fate, her real life began to mirror her on-screen role. At just 16, she started dating a 26-year-old member of the Crips and moved into gang territory in Inglewood, California. In 2005, she was gunned down outside of her apartment in a gang-related shooting, struck multiple times and left to die on the sidewalk. The man who killed her was later sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms without parole. In 2011, 48-year-old New Zealand truck driver Stephen McCormick slipped between the cab and trailer of his truck and landed ass-first onto a compressed air hose. The metal nozzle pierced his left cheek and began blasting air into his body at around 100 psi. But instead of entering his bloodstream, which would have killed him instantly, The air forced its way beneath his skin, inflating him like a balloon and separating his fat from muscle tissue. His body swelled rapidly while his skin became dangerously tight as paramedics rushed him to the hospital. Doctors managed to relieve the pressure and stabilize him, and against all odds, McCormick survived the freak accident without any permanent damage. In 2021, 16-year-old Kennedy Littledyke was ejected from her car during a high-speed crash in Idaho, miraculously landing on a 30-foot-high power line dangling upside down by her now broken leg. The pressure from the wire pinched her femoral artery, preventing her from bleeding out, while an electrical burn cauterized another wound in her neck. She hung there for about an hour until rescuers finally cut the power and freed her. Despite having 21 surgeries and losing her leg, Kennedy miraculously survived, and now shares her story and journey to recovery to inspire others online. In 2020, 16-year-old promising soccer player Alexander Gomez was tragically shot and killed by police in Mexico after officers allegedly mistook him for a criminal when he was riding his motorcycle to buy a soda. The killing sparked national outrage and drew attention to police violence in Mexico. At the boy's funeral, his teammates honored him by placing his coffin in front of a goalpost and gently kicking a soccer ball against it to score his final goal, a moving tribute to a life full of promise that was cut tragically short. In 2008, Mark Ruffalo's younger brother Scott, a well-known Beverly Hills hairstylist, was found slumped on his bathroom floor with a single execution-style gunshot wound to the back of his head. He died a week later as police called it a targeted killing and questioned two individuals who were ultimately not charged. Today, Scott's death still remains an unsolved Hollywood mystery, a wound his older brother Mark still carries. Mark later said, "You never get over it, you just get used to it." In 2008, a 7-year-old boy from India named Akrid Jaswal performed life-changing surgery on a poor village girl whose fingers had been fused together from severe burns. Her family couldn't afford proper medical care, so in desperation they turned to Akrid, a child prodigy who had taught himself medicine by reading textbooks at age 5. Despite no formal training, Akrid successfully separated her fingers, restoring the use of her hand. He later entered college at age 12 and now works as a medical researcher driven by his mission to cure cancer. In 1991, Eric Clapton's 4-year-old son Connor was visiting his mother's apartment in a New York City skyscraper. The building was undergoing maintenance, and a janitor left a window open without a safety guard on the 53rd floor. While playing, Connor ran toward the window, which was floor to ceiling, and fell 49 stories to his death. Despite the negligence, no criminal charges were filed against the worker responsible. At the time, Eric had just begun to build a relationship with Connor after years of struggling with addiction. Completely devastated, Clapton channeled his grief into writing Tears of Heaven, one of his most popular songs to this day. In 2018, a man was riding an escalator in a New York City subway station when his oversized sweatshirt suddenly became caught in the machinery. As the escalator continued moving, the fabric began to tighten around his neck. By the time help had reached him, he'd already been strangled to death by his own clothing. In 2018, Brad Lewis leaped from a 13-foot-high balcony to grab his 2-year-old son who had fallen while chasing a toy. Lewis cradled the boy midair, taking the full impact on solid concrete. He suffered a fractured skull, brain injuries, and a broken vertebrae, while his son survived with only minor injuries. Gary Coleman became a massive star as a child on Diff'rent Strokes, earning him millions, but his parents and business advisor embezzled most of his fortune over the years. Once he turned 18, he sued them and won a measly $1.3 million settlement, by which point his career had faded and the medical bills were racking up. As an adult, Coleman struggled financially and battled constant health issues from congenital kidney disease, the condition that resulted in his 4'8" height due to the medications used to treat it when he was a child. His final years were marked by bitterness toward Hollywood and especially his parents. He once said, "If I had the choice, I wouldn't be famous. I'd be a happy, healthy, regular guy." When he suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage after a bad fall in 2010, Coleman had written in his will that he wanted no funeral, no wake, and that his parents should not be informed about or allowed to attend any memorial services held in his honor. While filming in Atlanta in 2023, Jamie Foxx suffered a sudden life-threatening stroke brought on by a brain bleed. The exact cause was never publicly revealed, fueling widespread speculation. Foxx blacked out for 20 days and required emergency brain surgery to save his life. When he finally woke up in a wheelchair, unable to walk or speak, doctors warned him, "This will be the toughest year of your life." Foxx later described seeing a terrifying hot tunnel and admitted he came within inches of death. He had to relearn basic functions and now calls the experience a brutal reminder of life's fragility. In 2010, 24-year-old Australian woman Phoebe Hanjuk was found dead at the bottom of a trash compactor after somehow plunging feet first down a narrow 12th-floor garbage chute. Experts argued the act would have been virtually impossible without assistance, yet her death was ruled accidental and no one was charged. In 2010, a woman tried to smuggle a live, drugged-up tiger cub through a Bangkok airport, hidden inside her checked suitcase among several plush toy tigers. Security only discovered it when an x-ray revealed bones and a tiny beating heart among the pile of lifeless toys. The cub, barely hanging on to life, was rescued and later rehabilitated by a wildlife protection center. In a resurfaced video from 2016, Cardi B casually confessed to drugging and robbing men during her stripping days, luring them to hotel rooms under the guise of sex, then stealing from them once they were unconscious. No victims ever came forward, leading many to believe they were either too ashamed, unaware, or unable to remember what happened. Cardi later defended herself by saying she did what she had to do to survive and that she would do it again without regret. The confession drew widespread outrage in comparisons to infamous cases of sexual exploitation. Yet despite her disturbing admission, no charges were ever filed and her career continues to thrive. In October of 2023, a hunter stumbled upon the remains of a missing man deep in the mountains of Colorado. Lying faithfully beside him was his white Jack Russell Terrier, Finny, having somehow survived the unforgiving wilderness for months, refusing to leave her owner's side. A grieving daughter from the UK placed her mother's ashes in a bottle along with a touching message before throwing it into the ocean. Her mother had passed away from a heart condition at the young age of 51, never having the chance to fulfill her dream of traveling the world. The bottle was soon found by a family who posted the story online before honoring the heartfelt request. Morbid Facts, Part 637. In 1951, Mary Reeser was found almost entirely burnt to ashes in her armchair, with only her lower leg, backbone, and shrunken skull still remaining, while the rest of her Florida apartment showed very little fire damage. Though many speculated that it was a case of spontaneous human combustion, experts believe that she accidentally ignited herself while smoking and burned under a rare phenomenon known as the wick effect, where her clothing caught fire and her body fat acted like a human candle, fueling a slow, smoldering blaze that consumed her from within. To this day, the case remains one of the most chilling fire deaths ever recorded. In 1761, a French ship carrying 160 Malaysian slaves crashed into the barren Tromelin Island, resulting in 100 of them drowning while shackled below deck. The surviving 60 slaves were forced to build a raft for the fleeing French crew, who promised they'd return but never did. Stranded on a small desolate sandbar with no trees, no fresh water, and no hope, the abandoned slaves endured 15 harrowing years. They scavenged shipwrecked debris for crude shelter and tools, drank rainwater when it fell, hunted seabirds and turtles to stave off starvation, and managed to keep a fire burning despite there being no trees on the island. When rescue finally arrived in 1776, the island held only 7 emaciated women and a single infant. Baseball legend Mickey Mantle lived much of his life believing he was destined to die young, since most men in his family had died of Hodgkin's disease before their 40s. This belief caused him to develop a self-destructive lifestyle filled with alcoholism, womanizing, and constant risk-taking under the assumption that he wouldn't live past 40. He routinely drank before, during, and after games, eventually destroying his liver to the point of requiring a transplant at age 63. The surgeon who performed the transplant later said that Mantle's body was in as bad a shape as any I've ever seen. Haunted by guilt, depression, and the belief that his family was cursed, Mantle spent his final years seeing visions of dead relatives and publicly warning his young fans not to look up to him. He later said that if he hadn't abused alcohol for so many years, he could have been twice the player he already was. Just before dying of liver cancer and cirrhosis in 1995, Mickey famously said, "If I knew I was gonna live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself." In February of 1978, 23-year-old college student Stephen Kubacki totally vanished while cross-country skiing near Lake Michigan. His skis, poles, and backpack were found near the lake, and his footprints led onto the ice before abruptly ending, leading authorities to believe he had fallen through and drowned. But 15 months later, in May of 1979, Kubacki reappeared in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, approximately 700 miles away from where he vanished. He claimed to have no memory of the intervening time, stating he woke up in a field wearing unfamiliar clothes and carrying a backpack with maps and other items he didn't recognize. Kubacki never spoke publicly again, and the bizarre case remains unsolved. In 1559, King Henry II of France held a grand jousting tournament to celebrate his daughter's marriage, despite ominous warnings, including a prophecy that he would be pierced through the eye. During the friendly match, a lance splintered on impact, driving a wooden shard through Henry's eye and deep into his brain. Though initially conscious, he soon suffered excruciating pain, seizures, and neurological decline over 10 agonizing days before dying. His gruesome death shocked all of Europe and led to the downfall of jousting in France.